This happened on New Year's Eve last year. I'm sharing it now because I've gone over it in my head enough times to know I'm not misremembering it, and because nothing like it has happened since. I live alone in a small house on the edge of town. It's not rural, but it's quiet. The houses are spread out, and most people keep to themselves. I've lived there for 3 years, and aside from the occasional dog barking or fireworks on holidays, nothing ever really happens. That night, I didn't have plans. A few friends invited me out earlier in the week, but I declined. I had work early the next morning and didn't feel like dealing with traffic or drunk people. I told myself I'd stay up until midnight, watch the countdown, and go to bed. Around 10:30 p.m., I locked the doors like I always do. Front door, back door, and the side door that leads to the garage. I remember checking the back door twice because the lock sticks sometimes. I turned on the TV, sat on the couch, and scrolled on my phone while some New Year's Eve special played in the background. By 11:59, I put my phone down and paid attention to the TV. I wasn't excited, just waiting for the night to be over. When the countdown started, I watched the numbers drop. 10, 9, 8. When it hit 0, there was cheering on the TV, confetti, music. I muted it almost immediately. The house felt loud all of a sudden, and I didn't feel like listening to it. I sat there in silence for a moment. No fireworks outside yet, no noise from neighbors, just quiet. About a minute later, I heard a knock at the front door. 3 knocks. Slow. Evenly spaced. It didn't sound aggressive. It didn't sound like someone was in a hurry. It sounded deliberate, like whoever was knocking expected me to answer. I stayed seated for a few seconds, listening. I thought maybe it was a neighbor wishing me a Happy New Year, or someone who had the wrong house. I stood up and walked toward the living room window that faces the street. I pulled the curtain back just enough to look outside. There were no cars parked in front of my house, no headlights, no one walking down the road. The streetlights were on and everything looked normal. I went back toward the door but didn't open it. I asked who it was. My voice sounded louder than I expected in the quiet house. No answer. About 30 seconds passed. Then there were 3 more knocks. Same pattern, same pace. I checked the time on my phone. 12:04 a.m. I remembered that because I thought it was strange. If someone was going door to door, they would have knocked earlier, closer to midnight, or they would have said something by now. I asked again who it was. Nothing. I stood there, listening for movement on the porch, footsteps, a cough, anything. But there was nothing. Then I heard another knock. Not at the front door. It came from the back of the house. Same 3 knocks, same spacing, same sound. The back door is on the opposite side of the house. There's a small yard behind it, fenced in. You can't see it from the street. I stayed where I was. I didn't move toward the back door. I didn't call out. I just listened. There was no sound of someone walking around the house, no footsteps on gravel, no gate opening, just the knocks. I backed away from the door and walked toward the hallway. I didn't turn any lights on. I didn't want to draw attention to where I was. Another set of knocks came, this time from the side door near the garage. 3 knocks. At that point, I knew something wasn't right. No one could move around the house that fast without making noise, and even if they could, it didn't explain why they weren't saying anything. I went into the bathroom at the end of the hall and closed the door. I locked it and sat on the edge of the bathtub. The bathroom doesn't have any windows, and it felt like the safest place to be. I held my phone in my hand and watched the time change to 12:06 a.m. The house was completely silent. Then I heard knocking again. This time, it wasn't on a door. It was on the wall.
The sound came from the other side of the bathroom wall, the wall that separates the bathroom from the hallway. 3 knocks. Slow. Firm. I didn't move. I didn't call out. I stayed exactly where I was, listening to my own breathing and the faint hum of the bathroom vent. The knocking didn't come again right away. Instead, I heard something else. A sound like someone standing up from a crouched position, fabric shifting, very close. My phone vibrated in my hand. A text message. No name, no number saved, just a message. Happy New Year. I stared at the screen, waiting for another message to come through. Nothing did. The time on my phone changed to 12:07 a.m. And then I heard the knocking again. This time, it was on the bathroom door. 3 slow knocks.
The knocks on the bathroom door stopped. Not immediately. They ended the same way they started, spaced out, controlled, like whoever was on the other side decided they were done. I stayed seated on the edge of the tub. I kept my eyes on the door handle, expecting it to move. It didn't. The house went quiet again. I checked my phone. No new messages, no missed calls. I opened my contacts and scrolled, half expecting to see an unknown number saved somehow. There was nothing. I typed out a message asking who it was, then deleted it. I didn't want to start a conversation with someone who hadn't explained why they were there. I stayed in the bathroom for a long time. I didn't time it exactly, but the clock on my phone changed from 12:07 to 12:15 while I sat there. No sounds, no movement. Eventually, I convinced myself the person had left. Maybe it really was someone drunk. Maybe they thought my house belonged to someone else and gave up when no one answered. I unlocked the bathroom door, but didn't open it right away. I listened first. Nothing. I opened the door slowly and stepped into the hallway. The lights were still off. The only glow came from the living room window, where distant fireworks reflected faintly against the glass. I walked toward the living room, checking each doorway as I passed it. Everything looked normal. The front door was still closed. The back door, too. The side door hadn't moved. I didn't see anyone. I didn't hear anything. I stood in the living room for a moment, listening. Then I went to the kitchen and poured myself a glass of water, mostly to give myself something to do. That's when I noticed something that didn't make sense. The back door was unlocked. I stood there staring at it, trying to remember if I'd checked it earlier. I knew I had. I always do. And I remembered testing the lock because it sticks. I locked it again and checked it twice. I went back to the living room and sat down on the couch. I told myself I was done for the night. I didn't turn the TV back on. I didn't feel like sleeping either. I just sat there, listening to distant fireworks and watching the time move forward on my phone. At 12:26 a.m., my phone buzzed again. Same unknown number. Another message. Why didn't you open the door? I didn't reply. I stared at the message, reading it over and over, waiting for something else to come through. Nothing did. I locked my phone and placed it face down on the coffee table. A few minutes passed. I tried to focus on the sounds outside. Fireworks, cars driving by, anything normal. Then, I heard a sound from the hallway.
It wasn't knocking this time. It sounded like someone testing a door handle. Slow, careful. I stayed seated. I didn't look toward the hallway right away. I waited to hear if it would happen again. It did. The sound came from the bathroom door. I stood up and moved toward the hallway, keeping my steps light. I didn't want to make noise. I didn't know why, but it felt important not to announce where I was. When I reached the bathroom, the handle wasn't moving anymore. Everything was still. I checked the door. It was locked. That didn't make sense. I hadn't locked it after leaving the bathroom. I unlocked it and opened the door. The bathroom looked exactly as I'd left it. Nothing out of place, no signs anyone had been there. I stepped back into the hallway and locked the door again. Another vibration came from my phone. Don't do that. I picked up my phone and typed a reply. Who is this? I stared at the screen after sending it. No response. I decided to call the number. It rang once, then silent. No voicemail, no disconnect sound. Just silence. I hung up. I went back to the front door and checked the lock. It was secure. I pulled the curtain back again and looked outside. Still no cars. Still no one on the street. When I turned back toward the living room, I noticed something new. The hallway light was on. I knew I hadn't turned it on. I avoid turning on lights when I'm nervous. I stood there looking at it, trying to convince myself I'd done it without thinking. Another message came through. You left it on. I turned the light off. The house went dark again. I didn't sit back down. I stood in the living room, holding my phone, waiting. At 12:41 a.m., there was another knock. Not on a door. It came from the ceiling, directly above the living room. 3 knocks. Slow, heavy.
After the knocks from the ceiling stopped, I stayed where I was. I didn't move toward the hallway or the doors. I didn't look up again. I kept my eyes on the living room floor and waited for something else to happen. Nothing did. The silence felt intentional, like whoever was making the noise had decided to wait and see what I would do next. I checked my phone. 12:43 a.m. No new messages. I thought about calling the police. The idea crossed my mind more than once, but every time I tried to justify it, I stopped myself. I couldn't explain what was happening in a way that made sense. Someone knocking, a few strange messages, a light turned on. I told myself they asked questions I wouldn't be able to answer. I decided to check the rest of the house. Not quickly, not recklessly. I moved from room to room, keeping the lights off, using my phone screen when I needed to see. I checked the bedrooms first. Closets, under the bed. Everything looked normal. The garage door was locked. The side door was still secure. When I reached the back door again, I stopped. The lock was turned, unlocked. I stood there, staring at it. I remembered locking it earlier. I remembered checking it. That memory felt clear. I locked it again and stood there, listening. No sound from outside, no movement in the yard. That's when I noticed the calendar on the wall next to the door. I hadn't changed it yet. December 31st was still visible, with a small note written on it from earlier in the month, something about a work meeting.
I stared at the date longer than I needed to. Another vibration from my phone. Same night, same time. I didn't understand what that meant at first. I scrolled up, looking for earlier messages. There were only 3. Happy New Year. Why didn't you open the door? Don't do that. I typed back. What are you talking about? The reply came faster this time. Last year. I felt confused more than anything. I thought back to the previous New Year's Eve. I'd lived in the same house then, too. I hadn't gone out that year either. I tried to remember if anything strange had happened. Something did come to mind. It wasn't dramatic. It was small enough that I hadn't thought about it in months. Last year, just after midnight, someone had knocked on my front door. I remembered it clearly now. 3 knocks. Slow. I'd been half asleep on the couch and ignored it. I assumed it was someone drunk or confused and went to bed. Nothing else happened. No messages, no unlocked doors, just the knock. I hadn't thought about it until now. I typed another message. What about last year? The dots appeared almost immediately. You didn't answer then either. I stared at the screen. My phone felt heavier in my hand. I typed, "So you came back?" The response took longer this time. Yes. I asked the next question before I could stop myself. Why? The reply came in 2 parts. Because you were home. And because you're still here. I didn't respond. I stood there in the kitchen, listening to the house, listening for any sound that might tell me where this person was. There was nothing. Another message came through. You changed something this time. I typed. What? You moved. I thought back to earlier in the night. Last year, I hadn't gotten up. I'd ignored the knock and gone to bed. This year, I'd walked to the door. I'd spoken. I'd moved through the house. A new message appeared. You weren't supposed to. I felt a strong urge to get out of the house, to leave everything behind and drive somewhere with lights and people. I grabbed my keys from the counter and headed toward the front door. Before I reached it, my phone buzzed again. It's past that now. I stopped. I checked the time. 1:02 a.m. Another message. If you leave, it doesn't finish. I didn't ask what it was. I stood there with my keys in my hand, listening to the quiet house. Then I heard something from the living room. The TV turned on by itself. Low volume, a recorded countdown. 10, 9, 8. I looked at my phone again. The date still read January 1st, but the time wasn't moving. It was stuck. 12:07 a.m. The countdown on the TV kept looping. 10, 9, 8, 7. I stayed in the living room, holding my phone, watching the numbers over and over, feeling like the house had stopped being mine. I tried calling the police earlier, but I hesitated. Who would believe me? A knock at midnight? A message from an unknown number? Doors unlocking on their own? I didn't sleep that night. I just stayed in the corner of the living room, listening. At dawn, I finally stepped outside. The street was empty, normal. Nothing moved. Over the next few days, the messages stopped, the knocks stopped, the house returned to what it had been before. I told myself it was over, that I had imagined it all. Then, a week later, the police came to my door. I opened it, confused. One of my neighbors had called them after seeing a man loitering near the street, apparently checking doors. They asked me a few questions, and I explained everything. The knocks, the messages, the lights, the TV countdown. The officer nodded slowly. Then he handed me a card with a case number. They said the man had been arrested nearby, and he'd been connected to multiple homes in the neighborhood. When I asked why he was doing this, the man looked at me through the bars in the patrol car and smiled. He said, "I just wanted to wish you a Happy New Year." I didn't respond. I didn't know what to say. After that, I sold the house. I don't stay home on New Year's Eve anymore. I don't even watch the countdown. I know now that the house was never haunted. There was no loop, no glitch, just him. Someone who could be anywhere, anytime. And the first time he knocked, he picked me.